Hey, welcome everybody. This is Workshop Studios, and today we have a guitar kit that we're going to be working on. And no, this is just sitting here. There's parts are just sitting on it. They're all loose. You can see here. Um, and This is called a hollow body guitar. Uh, kind of made famous in the 50s by a lot of folks that were kind of doing rockabilly kind of guitar style. But it's been used quite a bit since then as well, and kind of based on an original jazz guitar back in the 1930s and 40s. So it's pretty deep and it's pretty wide. It's based on a Gretsch 6120. So a Gretsch 6120 is about the same length and about the same width as this. The head style is more like a Gretsch White Falcon, which is also a hollow body guitar. The inlays are fingernail inlays, that's what they call these, which is like the 6120 style. This kit is just slightly bigger than that 6120. It's kind of bigger than that, but smaller than a White Falcon. So for the most part, it's going to be like a Gretsch 6120. And going to have a nice deep sound to it, rich sound, should I say. So what we're going to be doing is figuring out what color we want to do this and getting the right finish on it. And then we'll be assembling everything, all the electronics and all of that. And by the way, usual unboxing has been done, obviously. That's the box it comes in. It's kind of boring to take things out of a box, I think so. Anyhow, comes in a box like that, pretty straightforward. If you've ever done a kit, you know what they look like, and there's plenty of people out there who have done unboxing of kits before. So I'm leaning towards a color that I'll try and put an example of it right there. And it's kind of based on an orange color, and it looks a little bit more like what I would call the traditional Chet Atkins Gretsch. So there was a Gretsch made a guitar for Chet Atkins that he first started using in the like 1954, I think. And so I'm going to go for that color and see if I can't get kind of it's a close between a tan and an orange, but I think it's a really nice vintage look to it. Anyhow, join me as we start to do this build. Thanks. And by the way, if you wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe. Helps me out, helps me to keep the channel going the way it is, and doesn't cost you anything. So thank you very much. So it's got very nice wood. It's not the same as other guitars I've done. It's not a maple with figure in it. It is maple, but it's not very figured. It's got a little bit right in there. You can see just a few figures, but not very much. Not probably enough to try and get the finish to reflect it. But yeah, sides look good. Back looks good. There's some glue marks. I can already see there's some glue marks there. See that? There we go. Oops. Didn't like that. A little bit in there. You can see where it's dripped down. Some in here. But we'll get all that cleaned up. And the neck looks really nice as well. So we have nice wood on the neck. This one is got a cut there. It's not a solid piece, but that's all right. We can work with that. So let's get started. All right, everybody. So here's where I'm at on what stain to use. I hope you can see this, but what I've got here are two stains that I'm looking at. There's orange, which is straight out of this bottle of orange. Let me show you that. Straight out of this Sunshine Orange. I'm kind of leaning towards that because that's the color that the Gretsch did their original guitars in. It's kind of a naturally sort of color, but it is orange. And then this one's more of a brownish color. And I've set these lights up so you can see what I see. If I don't, I'll show you. They just go dark. So I have to get light shining right through them for you to see them, the difference between the two. The other thing is the stain or the dye tends to settle in the bottom. So if I do that, you see it turning cloudy there. And the same thing with this one is I do that and you see it turning cloudy. Now the light barely penetrates it. You can see that on both sides. So let me show you what that looks like on the wood. You'd think it was a lot darker, but this is the brown. I'll get really close. In fact, I'll put this light up here so you can see what I'm saying. This is the brown, and the brown, by the way, is a combination, I forgot to say that, is a combination of the orange, of this dark brown, lemon yellow, and this orange. So I've been trying to modify it so that it gives me kind of a tannish orange color. So let me show you here what I've got. So this is the brown. Let me get the light up here. This is the brown on this side, and this is the plain orange, if you want to think of it that way, the sunshine orange. I'm trying to get the light so you can see it. There we go. That's not bad. You might notice that there's not a lot of difference between the two. You can see more brown in this one here, and much less brown in this orange one here. Orange, brown. So I'm leaning towards doing this the first time through, just because it's closer to what I've seen in the in all of the different pictures I've seen of the Gretsch 6120. The other thing is I've taken this dye, this is liquid, I've taken this dye and watered it down significantly, so it's probably at least a 1 to 5, maybe even 1 to 7 dilution on this one, and that makes it very, very thin, and this one is also very, very, if you want, watery. So that helps to put it into context. Now here's the neck, okay, and this part will be glued inside of the body. So I'm just trying out just to make sure that I see this wood, which I'm going to assume is as close to the wood of the body as I can. There's the orange, there's the brown, and I've done, this is the brown, this is the orange, and then I've gone orange over brown there. And I think I don't like that color. It looks a little muddy. I don't know, just to me. Looks just, again, let me get the light up here for you so you can, but when I put the light on it, almost all of that fades. So I think at this point I'm committed. I'll go for the orange one here and see what that looks like. And remember, if you've seen some of the other videos, we have to do several sandings on this to get both the wood smooth and to get the glue out of the remaining glue from the manufacturer off the surface. So the first coat of stain we put on is going to be sanded down pretty light, so I don't think I worry about it too much. But let's go with the orange and we'll see how that looks. By the way, this is a bit of a emotionally fraught moment in the guitar build on a kit like this, because it really is, much of it is about the finish and what color you're looking for, because they've done all the hard work of building the guitar. The neck is all done. I've built necks before, and this is very difficult to do. Get all that shape and get these shapes and everything drilled correctly, and then even more so, I don't mean to go on and on, but when I look at the guitar itself, it's an arch-top guitar. I don't want to get too close to the stain here, but it's an arch-top guitar with a lot of detail. So they've really done all of that hard work. So our job is to pick the right stain and then get the right finish. All right, let's get started. So I used the P400 sandpaper. It's purple like this. I'm not going to use this very much from now on. The first time I go over it, I'm taking the, there's a kind of a fuzzy layer on top that is left there when it's just the wood as it comes from the factory, and the first stain lifts it up a little, and so this is a little heavier than I would use going forward, but for this time it's great. And I think I got them all, but let's try out this spot right here. So what I'm going to use is the water that I was rinsing with last when I put the stain on. So there's hardly anything in there, it's mostly water, but it'll help me see if the water's penetrating that surface. So let's put that on there and see what we think. I don't know if I got some of them, but not all of them. There's a good example right there. See, that one may not have gotten it. So let's just wipe her down here real quick and take a look. Again, I'm just using, this is just water with a little bit of stain in it. You can see it's slightly orange. I'm trying not to stain it too much more as I figure out where all the glue is, if I can help it. And plus, just be mindful, you don't want to use too much water on this thing. This is a laminate, so there is glue holding the layers together. It's pretty good and solid, but still you don't want to keep soaking it too much. So I'm trying to do a light coat of this on here. Well, it still looks like this has got glue on it, but I'm going to try something else real quick. I've got the stain rag that I used before, so I'm going to put that on there and see if that starts to get the stain in there. And I don't see it, so I've got some more work to do. All right, so this has still got a glue layer on it that's protecting it from the stain, so I'll keep working on that. Just a brief kind of technical tip on FYI is I'm making the switch to going to 2000 sandpaper, wet or dry sandpaper, for all my very fine sanding instead of the steel wool. Steel wool does a great job, but it breaks off little pieces of steel and they're kind of all over the place. It's just messier. So, in fact, you can see some of it right here on the paper. It just fell out of there. You see all that junk that just fell out? So I'm making the switch away from steel wool. As much as it does a great job, it just isn't as neat, if you might, as this stuff. And I've got wonderful grades on this, 2000, 1000, 600. So for those of you who are interested, this is the grade of sandpaper I've just used now before I put this last coat of stain on and then go to sanding sealer. And as I've said in some of my other videos, this is very, very much a tactile thing. You have to sand and feel and look until you're satisfied that you've gotten the kind of very, very fine finish on the wood that feels good to the touch. The better that the wood is sanded, the better that the final finish will be. It's just that's the way it is. So really want to get this finish sanded down to down to the 2000s, which yes, there's a grit to it. This is a brand new piece, so there is a little grit to it, but it's not much. So anyhow, a little technical note there. One other technical note, if you might, is here's our original sticks that we've been using to give us a preliminary feel for the stain. And I'm glad that I didn't go with this brown. I think that it would have been too dark. And even this brownish orange here, I think would have been the wrong color. This bright orange, I think, has a much better feel to it. It looks just brighter. Try not to have a dull finish if I can help it. Brown can be a nice finish, but and then this was the one that I put the full orange stain on, and it did a pretty good job. It's pretty close to what we were looking at. That's the lighter version, darker version. So we've ended up with the darker version. And one of the big questions, which I've mentioned before, is that when you get this much surface area with a stain on it, even though the colors may be similar, it just has a different feel or look, if you want to put it that way. So eventually you got to put it on the guitar. You got to see how the wood takes the stain. You got to see where the blemishes are, and you might notice that this spot over here that we've been working on, that's the spot that didn't take stain for a while. It's taking it now, but it certainly has some sort of variation between here and here. So it just happens that's going to happen sometimes. But I'm going to put one more coat on this one of stain, as I just said, and I think that'll help to even out some of these areas. All right, good. let's get started. All right, so another light sanding with the 2000 grit. Very, very light. I'm talking just sort of gently kissing the surface, and it should be very smooth to the touch, which it is. And now it's time for the sanding sealer. That's what we're going to use right there. Sorry, I should have held it still. And I would normally get it in spray, but nobody had it, so I got it in liquid form here, and we'll brush it on. It's not meant to be something that sits on the surface. It's intended to sink into the wood a little bit, and then seal in this this dye. Because being water-soluble dye means that I could run water over this and it would change the color. It would start taking it out. So we put this on to lock that in. So we've gotten it to where we want it to be. Everything looks good, nice and smooth. And the back looks good. It's got some interesting lines in it here. They're a little more pronounced on the video than they are in when you're looking at it. But that's just part of the wood or the manufacturing or whatever. But it gives it a little character. Anyhow, looks really good. And it's time for the sanding sealer. And the neck, of course, looks great too. Yep. Neck looks very good, nice and smooth. All right. By the way, I'm just going to be using a foam brush to put this on, nothing fancy. All right, so this is the sanding sealer that I've sanded, and I wanted to just point out a little trick that you use when doing very, very shiny surfaces, is that you want to see it in reflected light. And that's what I'm doing with the camera here, is I'm trying to give you a look at it. And you can see here, there's just a little bit of brush stroke you can see. Let's see if I can get that in focus for you, sorry. Just a little bit of brush stroke right there. And you got to keep moving around to see stuff. You can see drips this way. You can see just a few brush strokes there. And over here, there's just a little bit of something. Now, it feels incredibly smooth to the touch, and this is only the sanding sealer so far. So it's probably good enough to go ahead and put the first coat of lacquer on, and then we'll see any more defects, and hopefully they'll get sanded out as we go through this. But right now, it looks like a pretty good finish. I can feel just a little roughness right in here. Now, this is between the two pickups, and so this doesn't see a lot of, I mean, you can see it, but it's got strings all over it. But still, we want to get everything as nice as we can. So I feel a little bit more, I might a little more sanding right in there. But it's important to use your fingers, do tactile. I can see feel just a little roughness there, and you can see there's just a little something when you do the reflected light. So anyhow, it is, I mean, it can be a tedious job if you're not into that kind of thing. But it's also kind of, I don't know, get in your Zen mode if you might. And you just know that when you're doing finishes like this, you put a coat of lacquer, you let it dry and harden, and then you do a very light sand with the 2000 wet dry sandpaper, and then another coat of lacquer. And you just keep doing that. And each time you do it, it gets a little bit better. You can start taking all the defects out. So anyhow, let's go ahead and finish up sanding, and then we'll put our first coat of lacquer on. All right, so here we are after that first coat of lacquer on there, and this is probably pretty close to what it's going to look like in the finish. The lacquer we'll put on just keeps building up coats for protection, and then we'll finally do a very high polish on it. But for right now, I'm really pleased. I think that's turning out very nicely. You can see it even brings out a little bit of that interesting structure in the grain. I hadn't expected that. Let's turn it around and see what the back looks like. Yeah, it's more plain back here, but still very pretty. So yeah, I like this color, and I think that it's pretty true to the original. It may not be exactly right, but it's getting close. So, and then the neck has finished out to match very nicely. So looking very good. Again, I don't know if you, I don't think I showed you this, but I go ahead and tape off the fingerboard when I start lacquering, just to keep it from getting a big coat of lacquer on. We will be doing work on the frets to get them all level, and any burrs off of them, and then we'll clean up the fretboard itself as well, but it just is easier if there's no lacquer on there. So far so good, and we'll do just very light sanding and then more coats. So we'll back up here a little, give you a little bit higher view of what's going on. So there we go. Looking nice. I'm very pleased with that. Okay, let's continue on with the lacquer. And by the way, because the lacquer is fully sealing it now, I can go ahead and do the wet dry sandpaper with water, and it helps to really take away the material that's sanded off, if you might. So I go ahead and do that. Not too much water, but just enough to lubricate the surface and get a nice sheen on it. So I've already actually done this surface, and I can feel it's nice and smooth now, ready for another coat of lacquer. So anyhow, if you would like to, you can go ahead with your, I use the 2000 here, the 2000 wet dry, oops, there we go, 2000 wet dry sandpaper with a little bit of water, and just keep wiping the water and the bits that come off with a towel or a rag or something. You just wipe it off, and I try not to get it down inside here, obviously, because that's now raw wood and don't want to have anything bubble up on me, but it's pretty easy, just a light coat. Anyhow, let's move on. Okay, so it's time to glue it. So let's go ahead and glue the body and the neck together. And to do this, we're going to use Titebond. Oh, there we go. Get it around like that, the ultimate. And we're going to put some of this in here. I tend to like to use more than enough glue if I can. That goes in here, because I can always wipe it off. There we go. And then I have a little reusable brush that I bought that does a nice job of getting it into all the nooks and crannies. And smeared around here. Oops. I'll get that off the top after we're done getting this put together. And there it is down there. Tell you, it's very nice when the kits have worked out all the angles and cut this neck block out so that it fits the neck beautifully. And I'll go ahead and do glue on this side as well. So we need that side, this side. So we're going to do, oops, I'm going to get over here so you can see it. So we want to do, oops, I probably shouldn't get it out there, but I'll wipe that off. And that's good there. So I don't need it over there, but I do need it over here. So, all right, that ought to do it. Oops, starting to drip on me here. So let's show you how it goes together here. So what I'm doing is I'm going to push this down so that this then gets level with that. So excuse me here while I do that. Here we go. And then what I want to do is make sure that I've tapped it into into the nice tight joint there. Let me get some paper towels here. All right, so let's get the excess glue. Now what I need to do is get this, I'll give you a close-up here. What I'm trying to do is get these surfaces all matched. Here, oops, it's kind of, let me move it over this way so you can see better. There we go. So we've got these and here, so I want to just tap those into place as much as I can. And I'm going to use a rubber mallet to do that. So I'll tap like this. And you want it to be a nice snug fit. And I'll tap down here, oops, so you can see it. So I'll keep doing that, kind of move it around until I get it there, and I'll show you. Okay, so you can see I've got 3 clamps on here now. These are this kind of a clamp, and that surface is good and mated. You can just barely see in there to see that surface. And this surface has a little gap in it right here, but it's mated, oops, get out of there so you can see it. It's mated on either side, here and down there. So this is just a little bit of an imperfection there, but we'll get that sorted. And then this surface is well mated except for right down there. So that's just to be expected, just a little bit of difference in there, but we'll get that sorted out easy peasy. So it is now glued. Now I'm going to go through with a wet cloth, and wipe off any of the glue residuals, and that'll help to minimize the work we need to do after this is all dried. All right, let's take the clamps off. Let's see how that looks. There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3 clamps. Get those out of the way. All right, so here's our edge. Well, that looks good. Nice and tight there. And that looks tight along the edge there. Good. Let's take a look at the other side here. And there's the gaps we were talking about that kind of happens sometimes where you jam it as far as you can in. You see this side has bottomed out here. So there was no way to get that any farther in. It might be that it's slightly at an angle, like that, or it needs to go like that, but we'll check that out. Shouldn't be too big of a problem. All right, so that's glued up, and we're ready to get on to the next thing. Okay, so tape is off. I've kind of worked on it. There's a few small spots that I need to get the finish cleared up on, but mostly it's cleared up now. So what I'm going to do now is work on the fingerboard. And the idea here is that if you are a guitar player, you know that you're sliding your hand all over the place on this thing, and you don't want any burrs. So as I run my fingers along the edges here, I can feel burrs along each one of these. And I'll zoom in here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. You may not be able, you probably won't be able to see them, but at least we can talk more specifically about them. So what happens is when these are cut and then sanded off, oops, there we go. It leaves little edges in there, right in here and here, that need to be cleaned up. And I can feel that one right there. There's just a little bit of it. And it doesn't feel like much, but it's enough that when you're playing the guitar, it can be very annoying and sometimes even slightly painful. So the idea is to get this so smooth that just really can't feel anything. So it's a little bit of a tedious job, because now what we're going to do is take a tiny file and we're going to go on each side of these to clean up that part of it. So that'll be number 1. Number 2 is that we're going to go over the entire fingerboard with 2000 wet dry sandpaper, and we're going to make this all very smooth along in here. And we'll do that last, actually. And then we're also going to level these frets. Let me back up again. We're going to level these frets so that when you're looking down the fingerboard this way, they are completely and utterly level. Now, we're going to do that without any strings on, obviously. And when you do put the strings on, it has a tendency to make the neck bow like this because the strings are pulling the head, this part of the guitar, they're pulling it that way, and that tends to make it bow up like this, and that leaves just a little bit of a bow in here. But that's what the nut is for, so we can adjust this to get the levelness to the fretboard that we want. So right now what we want to do is make sure that the frets are level all the way across and that there aren't going to be any high or low ones, no buzzing. And we'll do that with a flat board with some very fine sandpaper, maybe not 2000, but something a little more rough. And we'll go along here and just sort of work our way along the fretboard and make sure that all these are level. Now, my experience with these kits is they're pretty good, so I don't have to do too much. But I want to definitely give it a once over. So I'm going to do that right now. I don't think I'll show you all that because it's very tedious and it would just be me doing little teeny things even if I was going super fast and you wouldn't see what I was doing. So let me just go ahead and work on that. And I'll put a post or I'll put some links down below here as to how folks do this in more specifics, and maybe even some videos where they zoom in and show you what they're doing. Anyhow, I'll bring you back after I've got the fretboard done. Alright, so I've been working on these and they're pretty good now. But now what I want to do is level the frets, and it turns out that they're pretty close, but it's this second fret right here. So this one's a little low, so we're going to have to take all these down to make that fit. And one trick that I've learned from other folks is that you go over the top of the frets with something like a Sharpie marker, and you can see it's kind of dark. And then when you go over it with the sandpaper, you look for where it's worn away and where it hasn't. And you want to keep kind of lightly going back and forth until you've worn down, in essence, all of the shadow there. And you've worn down so that you can see bare metal on all of these. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. And hopefully I can get that fret level with the rest of them. And just FYI, I'm using a fairly straightforward, it's just a ruler like this. And I put it on there and it tells me that, in fact, I've got just a little bit of a gap on this fret here. So you can see the light through there. So it's not much, but we'll get it for level and then we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, well, look who's joined us. It's Gumby and Pokey. His little pal Pokey, too, for those of you that remember the song. Hi, everyone. This is Gumby. All right, Gumby, let's get out of the way so I can show everybody what happened. All right. So, through a combination of adjusting the nut and doing some light sanding, we now have it so that I'll use the level here to show you. Bang into everything here. So this is now very flat. Oops, there we go. I can barely show you here, but take my word for it, it is very flat. And we'll do a little minor adjusting. Bang on the guitar here. Do a little minor adjusting once we get the strings on, and that's mostly with the adjusting the nut up here. So I think we're good to go. We might do a little more just light sanding on these to polish them up, but we're done, I think, with the frets now. Okay, so we've made it to the stage where the finish looks good, and it's time to start putting the hardware on this guy. So I've just laid it on top again, just to make sure everything still looks good, and it does. The orange and black really go well together with the white popping here, so I'm very pleased with that. And here's the rest of it down in here, bits and pieces. So in this one, the wiring will be a little different than we've done in the previous guitars, because we've got a switch here, and then we've got control knobs, or pots if you want, here, oops, you can't see it there, and there. So we'll have wires running kind of like this around and in here. But this is, again, easier than the semi-hollow body guitars if you've watched those videos, because there it's very tight inside. This one is wide open all the way through here. So the trick will be just to run the wires so that they don't show through the F-holes. But other than that, it should be pretty straightforward, I hope. So, alrighty, let's get started on all that. Okay, so we're on to the electronics phase of this guitar. And just a couple of suggestions for you. First of all, I've laid out the components here. And we'll talk about that in a second, but I also suggest strongly that you print out the instructions from, in this case, the FretWire. And it's probably going to be true for lots of guitars, but the layout for the different volume controls, tone controls, and switches is actually determined, if you might, here in the handout. Let me show you. So you can see here, there's a point where they're talking about where the different components go, and then this is the wiring diagram. What they don't cover in here is something I've talked about in another video, and that is that you don't want wires running across the F-holes, because then you can look in here and see them. So the idea is to try and run the wires in a way that you don't see them in the F-holes. So one way I'm going to do it is, even though they provide wire, I've got some old telephone cable here that's already 6 wire, and I can use that to come down here. This is the output component. These are the two volume controls for these two pickups here. So they need to come up here and go off to the switch and tone controls and volume controls. So what I'm going to do is run this wire up through the middle of the guitar like this. That way you really have no chance of seeing these wires, so they'll be basically down like that. And then run it up here, and then I've stripped off a bunch here so that I can run these wires over to these various components. And then of course the pickups are here as well. So you've got two places to solder on the pickups. Now the other thing you'll want to do is make sure that you get everything in its right place. So I've put, kind of laid them out. So the only reason I have this on here, that's the bridge where the wire or the strings go across this to the tailpiece. And so the only reason I have this here is because you want to have this grounded. And they suggest you can squash a wire up against the surface here. Oops, get it over in there. That you can just squash it against the surface as you push it in. I kind of like to solder it on there. It's a little more certain. So there'll be this wire to deal with. And then all of the pickups. Now, the other thing that I've done is I swapped out this plug. The one they provide is all right, but it is very stiff, and so I've got a commercially available one. They're very inexpensive. Let's see, what else can I tell you? So then I go through and label all of the volume and tone controls so that I know which one is which. Get back here. I've got a paint pen that I use that. So this is the master tone control. So I've got an M and tone on there. Because once I get all the wiring harness built, it'll be outside the guitar, and then I'm going to feed it in the best way, probably through one of these holes. I'll feed everything in, and then they come up through the bottom of the guitar. But in the meantime, I won't know which one of these is which. It'll all be this big kind of a jumble. So I've labeled each one of these as to what it is. And that way, when I go to put it together, when I go to put the components in here, I'll know which one goes where. Even down here, these two, I've organized them, and they have it there too, so that this top volume control goes with the top pickup and the bottom one, just so it's more intuitive when you're making the adjustments. The other thing is I've labeled these because you want to put these in the right way, and it turns out on this particular one that not only do you want the right pickup in the right hole so that you get the right distance across there when the strings are on, but it turns out that they are different this way, that this edge on here is a little bit thinner than this edge, and it turns out that they fit in here best like that. So I have labeled these to be, oops, there we go, top, bridge, pickup, and there's the top and the bottom of it. So I know the orientation and the location of each of these. So anyhow, sorry, that's more than you probably need to know, but if you're going to be putting one of these together, those are the little nuances. So I'm going to just start wiring now, and so I'm following this wiring diagram, but I have to make sure that it lays out on the guitar correctly. So although this is really helpful, you really need to lay it out like this so that you get everything wired with the right length of wires in the right configuration of the wiring harness so that it'll lay in the guitar nicely and be easy to install. So it gives you plenty of wiggle room to get things up to where they belong. All right, so let me go ahead and get soldering. I don't think I need to bore you with all that. I'll show you what the wiring harness looks like when I'm done. For those of you who are into tools, and you may do a fair amount of soldering, it's nice to have tools like this one, which is, I guess you could call it a fifth hand, but it's got these little clippies and a magnifying glass so that I can get the component. I'll show you here. I've got one of the tone controls here. These are the places that you solder. And I'm looking through the magnifying glass now, and here's the wires that go to them, so that it's easier to see what I'm soldering, and I can come in here with the soldering iron very easily and be pretty precise. So it's a nice tool to have if you feel like adding a tool to your bunch of things. It's useful for a lot of stuff. Anyhow, these little clamps are great.
Well, doing guitars is kind of like making sausage. You're not sure you want to see behind the scenes, but here's the mess that I've made wiring. So it's not necessarily as straightforward as it's made out to be, or maybe it's just me, but it takes quite a bit. And here's the wiring harness in a big jumble, but it is working. So I'll show you what that looks like after I clean up.
All right, so here's after we cleaned up a bit. So here's the wiring harness as we described. So hopefully you can see everything. Here's this wire, kind of goes around here. You can see it there. So these go over here, and this one goes on the side down here. This one goes here. Here's one of the pickups. Here's the other pickup that'll go in that hole. And here is the switch. In there. There's the switch, and here is the tone control. So the tone, master tone, the master volume. This is neck and bridge volume and output, and then the two pickups. So it doesn't look like too much once we get it all set up, but you can see the spaghetti of wires. And the idea here again is that this wire, let's see if I can get over here so you can see it all, this wire will run in the guitar up through here, and all these wires will be up here so you won't see them through the F-holes. That's the hope. Okay, I'm going to go pretty fast on this, so enjoy. All right, so everything's fed into there. You can see it's all inside. Now the trick is to get up into these holes here and here and here. So this could be tricky, and maybe you can see some of this, and hopefully you can. But I will film as much as I can. All right, so there we go. Got those three in. That took quite a bit of effort to try and get that in there and get it right, but looks good. So we're going to keep going with the rest of these. Now what I did was I just put one screw in here to hold these in place because they were flopping around too much when I tried to move the guitar around, but hopefully these next three are going to be easier. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay, now that everything's installed, what I'd like to do is double check to make sure that these pickups are the correct resistance in them. And this is in ohms. I've got it set at 200K, and that gives me an 8.1 reading. Now I'm going to flip the switch. So this is now supposed to be the bridge, and then I'm going to go, that's the middle part of the switch. That means both pickups are working, which cuts the resistance in half. So it went from 8 down to 4. Then I'm up at the neck, and that's 8.7. So let's do that again. Neck pickup, 8.7. Both of them together, about half of it, 4. And the bridge pickup, 8.1. Very good. Now I'm going to do the volumes and see what happens. And that's the volume there for the bridge pickup. That's good. And now I'm going to go to the neck pickup, and there's it at full volume, and then I turn the volume knob, and there we go. Good. Now one last thing I'll do is check the overall volume, and that's to 0. Good. And there's full volume. Yep, good. Okay, everything seems to be working. The tone knob shouldn't have any impact, I don't think, on the readings here, so I just did that one. But that all works. So let's go plug it into the amp and see what it does. All right, so I think we got this done. So everything checks out. The wires, can't see them in the F-holes. So I think we're ready to proceed to the next step, which is to put all the rest of this hardware on here. Well, so here is the guitar all finished up. And I want to just kind of zoom over a little bit and show you how it turned out. So it turned out really, really nice, I think. Yeah. It's a really, really nice looking guitar. And it was a fun kit to do. And I think it sounds pretty good too. So I'm about to give you a little sound test on it. Being silly, of course. But this is the guitar playing this song. So enjoy the song. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Catch you on the next video. Bye.